time to get this on the road or on the barrel. I don't know, something like that. We've got our nutmeg. We have our tea, other various beverages and containers here. Today's live stream is all about cooperage and the cooper. We call them barrels. They might have called them casks in the 18th century, but they have all kinds of products in the 18th century. I'm your host, John Townsend, and we're going to be talking about fun 18th century stuff today. We're going to be looking at pictures and talking about the way life was 250 years ago, 300 years ago, and the kinds of products that were a mainstay of the economy, and yet today they've shrunk down to this tiny little sliver of products that probably only continue to use it for strange tradition, when they would probably love to if you use plastic instead or stainless steel or something. It's just terrible. It's terrible. But we're going to be talking about barrels, and I am joined by Lauren on the other side of the time vortex. She is in the chat.
Hello.
And Ivy is on the console.
Hello, everyone.
And they're there. So I'm not just doing this by myself. In fact, Lauren did all the work on the pictures today. Okay, I'll just say that straight up front. The reason why I kind of picked this topic out was because of this guy right here. It looks terrible, doesn't it? Look at that. It's all this thing. I have tortured it. Was it a test? Or was I just lazy? This bucket was used in the well digging episode. And it has basically just kind of sat there on the lid of the well for, I don't know, when did we do that? Was it 2 years ago?
I can look it up.
Was it 2 or 3 years ago? Something like that. We did the well episode, and this was the bucket for that. This bucket has stayed outside. It has had water in it. It is dried out. It has been there in the winter time with water in it. I mean, you really couldn't torture a bucket more than this particular bucket has been tortured, and yet it still holds water, works perfectly. This is a bucket made by our cooper, whose name is Peter Cooper, which is very hilarious. And he's like a retired software engineer or something. I don't know. But he makes these buckets, and I met him at the Feast of the Hunter's Moon. Watched him make buckets and said I said, do you want to make buckets for us? So he makes these cedar buckets, and he does an incredible job on these. They are available on our website, but it's just one of the many. We don't really think about wooden buckets today. Nobody's going to some hardware store to buy a wooden bucket, but we still carry them, and they are an incredible product. We've got other barrels here, example barrels. This barrel is from France, I believe. I think my father picked this one up. Who knows how many years ago? Probably in '92. So, a long time ago. Love it for the fact that it's oval shaped and just amazing. We talked about butter a couple of weeks ago, and this butter churn is made by a cooper. We've got small barrels and big barrels hanging out here. We do sell other kinds of barrels on our website, generally meant to be water barrels. That manufacturer also makes wine barrel, whiskey barrels. They're of a slightly different quality, and we'll talk about the qualities and the types of barrels as we go. So,
I did look it up, and the well video was from 2022.
2022. Mm-hmm. So that was 3 years ago. Yep. So that bucket has just done some amazing work. So a vast quantity of items in the 18th century were shipped in barrels, especially on board ship. You can make barrels to do a lot of different things. They were sturdy. They could handle the kind of shipping that was happening in the 18th century. So you can imagine things on board ship, and they might get wet, they might do all kinds of things. You can't ship in a cardboard box. And crates and things are harder to put together. The wooden barrel really made in all sorts of shapes and sizes and qualities, works with virtually any kind of product. Sometimes things were done in bales instead, but something like tobacco, which we wouldn't think today would be shipped in barrels, was shipped in barrels in the 18th century. Some things that were wet, liquids were always shipped in barrels. Some things that were dry were specifically shipped in barrels to keep them dry. So barrels were used in just about everything in some way, shape, or form. The barrel makers it's one of the kind of the more difficult skills for the 18th century. So they're doing woodworking, but it's kind of a high level woodworking, and it's kind of there are certainly secrets to the trade, at least in the 18th century. By the time we get to the 19th century, it becomes a little bit more industrialized and the process so that just about anybody can do it. We've got some pictures from the 18th century, and I've got a little video clip from the early 20th century showing people making barrels. And undoubtedly you could find other barrel construction things on YouTube that are a lot more modern, but I always like looking at these fun newsreel videos, and so do we want to jump in with that, or do you want to do anything first?
I thought we might do like some of the pictures first, just to kind of give people a sense of what's going to be happening in the video.
Right.
So there's about maybe 10 pictures of people making things and the different tools.
Right. So let's go ahead, let's jump into that. This is one of the plates from Diderot's encyclopedia, the Arts and Trades Encyclopedia from France, and it's from the late 18th century. And we have many different stages here going on. They're putting them all together, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily would be put all together. But in the foreground here, we have people in the extreme foreground, and in the sort of in the background, but slightly off to the right. These men are forming the staves themselves. Now, this isn't the first stage of barrel making, because there's a whole stage of the felling of the trees, and you would generally use, for the highest quality kegs, you're going to be using oak. You're probably going to want a tree that's upwards to 200 years old. You're going to cut it down. You're going to slice it into pieces that are as tall as these staves are, which are probably 42 inches high or something like that. You would slice the tree into these 40 or 42 inch sort of log sections, and then you would split it up into the boards, and depending on the quality of the keg, you might try to get them split in a very particular way, with the grain running around the keg, basically, for the highest quality kegs. And then these staves are shaped individually. Somebody's hacking at them with draw knives, with particular kinds of side axes. And if you see the person in the foreground just off to the right hand side, it looks like he's working on this kind of a bench thing that's a really thick plank. But what he's using there is a jointer's shave, basically. So there's actually it's like a plane that you would use, except a plane for shaving wood, except it's upside down. It's a giant plane on legs, and he runs the board across the plane. So normally if you see planes today, you run the plane over the board, but this is done in the opposite way. You run the board over the plane and it shaves the edge. So he's beveling the edge of the board. They're shaving them down to size here and there. We've got other tools. The person just on the left in the foreground, he is hooping up the barrel. He's doing the very first stage where he's putting the staves together, and then he's putting hoops on it. We don't really see the heating of the barrel in any of these stages, but that's all right. We go to the center back, and he's using a windlass to pull the staves in. Depending on the kind of thing that the barrel will have in it, some of them are a lot more barrel shaped. In other words, they're smaller diameter at the ends than they are in the middle. If it's something that's sort of fairly dry cooperage, doesn't matter as much, then the barrel might almost be just a straight cylinder, and it's really not quite as important. But we see other people working with hoops in the background. So let's jump ahead. Here we go. Here we have this first stages. We can see the staves at the top and how the last one, figure 3, is tapered in toward the ends. We have the very first stage where we put the first of the staves into this iron hoop, and then we start to put more and more in it, and then we flip it upside down, and we have the windlass there, and the kind of different stages of the very first putting the cask together. Now here we see lots of different products that are made in a similar sense. The first plate here on the left, we've got heading, how heads go together in the kegs, and I have seen even some modern like wine kegs using this technique where kind of wedges hold it together. Most of the like whiskey and beer barrels we see today just have the plain boards that are going across the top. A lot of times those are doweled in the 18th century so that the boards are locked together. We see different hoop designs down there at the bottom, and then all these crazy buckets and barrels. We see a milk churn there. We see even pitchers, weird long barrels, and vats of different sorts. Very, very common for different, let's say, trades, like somebody who's brewing beer. He's going to have a big giant vat made by the cooper. And then we have some cooper's tools along the side there. Lots of scrapers and hammers and different tools to do that. Now there's some the cooper has some super specialized tools to do what he's doing. In the top there are of course knives and hammers, but you see the a wooden shaper called a scorp for scraping out and planing off the wood on the inside. We also have some specialized hoops there for pulling the keg together. In that middle section we have different kinds of benches, and we see there plate 5, that's that bench that is actually a plane, and we can see the knife there, the little C part there on that. And then on the bottom there we have different sorts of windlasses that will squeeze that barrel together so we can get the hoops on it. Very, very difficult to do. And then on that last plate we have how do you deal with the barrel? How do you move it around, lift it up? We have special wagons even for holding the barrels together and carting them around town. Okay, there we go. That was Diderot's Encyclopedia and the plates for making of the barrels. Now, when we move into the 19th century, they start to industrialize this, and they come up with giant machines to help construct the kegs. That's when kegs were still being kind of used industrially. I don't know, they probably disappeared by the Second World War to a great extent. Today, they're still using them in the wine industry, in the whiskey industry. And basically for decoration. But that's about it. I can't think of very many other industries that still use a lot of wooden barrels. That's about it. So let's jump in. I don't know. I think Ivy will have to start this little video clip. This is done from in the 1920s. It'll get better here in a second. But here they are taking one of those giant oak logs and splitting it into sections. Let me tell you, I've done some of that work. It is not easy. They're using specialized saws here in the 1920s to cut up the staves. This would have all been done by hand in the 18th century. They're just, splitting them out. It would be a woodland art that somebody would do in the woods, and they would just make these giant stacks of this planks. They wouldn't do any of the other barrel work. They would just be somebody who worked in the woods and made the staves. And look at that, they're talking about, even then, they're aging them for 7 months. And they would have stacks like this. You imagine going into the woods and somebody's been there, he's making stacks and stacks of staves. They would be transporting shiploads of just raw staves. So here we got the first, he's got a special little frame, puts all the little staves together, and he's gonna know about how many and feel how it gets put together. Once we have the half done, we heat it up and we can see them putting them on. They're steaming them. This, in the 18th century, they would have this little fire basically on the inside. And he's got this windlass. It's got a wire rope that pulls that together. You can see it. But in the 18th century, it had a much simpler wooden style. Once it gets pulled all together, a temporary hoop goes around it and holds it together. And when it dries out, and they're drying them here, those staves stay in that shape. So even if you pop the top off, it isn't just gonna, spring back together. So now we can see the staves are in that barrel shape. Here he had a broken one, he had to take it out and put a different one that was pre-shaped together. And the iron bands they've got, while they're building them, they've got these super big iron bands. But later on, they'll take those bands off and put on their standard bands. But this is while they're shaping the barrels and holding them together, and especially when they need to be formed. So this is done before the heads are on. So they're drilling the bung holes here. And then this is a section where they're cutting that groove on the inside for the head to stay in. So he's showing that. And then the heads get put into the barrels. I think I chopped that part out because it was boring. No, there it is. So he's got a head and he's putting it into the barrel. Obviously, this would be done without having the giant machine in the 18th century, but a similar method. Basically, they're just using a wooden frame. The bands come off of the outs or the middle here, and then they're going to go ahead and shave the entire outside of the keg off. Now this is what's done in the 1920s. In the 18th century, that would all be done by hand. And then they put the finished bands on it. And they squeeze that up. And then the barrels are painted in this circumstance. And then we can kind of see what's going on, just how popular they were. So here they say, even in the 1920s, it was taking 9 months from cutting down the tree to a finished barrel. I don't think that was oak. And then they've got, look at that. I mean, just mountains and mountains of barrels. And that was in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. Just, I mean, the similar kind of situation is going on in the 18th century. They're just making huge quantities of barrels. You want to jump in with anything before I keep going?
Sure. So there is a super chat from Speed Style Tony. What is the reason that the bucket is smaller at the top? So the one that you have.
Right. So there you will see lots of different shapes, and we saw them in the pictures. Some of them are a bigger opening at the top than the bottom. They're going to be better. they're always more stable when they are, and they hold together better when they are tapered one way or the other, right? That way the bands can keep sliding on and it gets tighter and tighter. If you have a completely cylindrical thing, it's hard to get the bands to really tighten up. So a little bit of taper is good. We can have the taper one way or the other, doesn't matter. That way the bands can tighten up. But if we have a barrel or a bucket like this one that is a little bit wider at the bottom, it's a much more stable bucket. It's probably going to hold together better because it's wider at the bottom. If we had it wider at the top, there's nothing here at the top, no head, and so it can get a little loosey-goosey. So this is just a little bit more stable, and it's more stable on a surface. So they would use ones like this on board ship because tilting around, it's not going to fall over like a bucket that's smaller on the bottom than it is on the top.
So there's a gifted memberships from Mikey Mike, and he has a note that says, "Enjoy, you lucky tavern folk, you."
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then somebody was mentioning the fact that there are different barrel types for wet goods and dry goods, and we talked about that. I thought you might want to touch on that.
Yes, there's an incredible variety of the kinds of woods and the kinds of styles that they're making for kegs. So the kind of highest quality is probably the kegs that they would use for beer in the 18th century. And the problem specifically with a beer keg is that it's fermenting and it's going to get pressure from the inside. So it's got to be watertight and it's got to be able to hold pressure. So you got to have thicker staves in them, and there has to be the kind of the best quality of wood. So something like whiskey, on the other hand, you're aging that in the cask. It's not pressurized, but it still has to be so tight that alcohol won't evaporate out of it. So it's got to be a little more watertight. Now, if the water's always inside of it, or whiskey, or any liquid in there, it helps the wood stay swelled up and they kind of stay watertight. Wine barrels tended to be a little bit thinner, and they were a little bit easier to make. So they're not under the same kind of pressure, and they didn't have the same kind of need. There's also a difference in what's going on the inside of the barrel. So at least today, the whiskey barrels are specifically charred on the inside, and a wine barrel is not charred on the inside. It's called sap clear plain. It's not. There's a little bit of charring from the manufacturing process, but not to the extent where you're actually charring the inside for the aging of it in the same way. So beer is going to be different from that. But imagine another circumstance where you needed a keg, but the reverse is true. I need a keg that's watertight from the outside, not from the inside. So you need a keg that's going to hold gunpowder. Well, that's a completely different kind of situation. And gunpowder kegs, which is a typical way that they would transport gunpowder in the 18th century, they had to be watertight from the outside. So instead of having this liquid on the inside that always keeps the keg from getting too loose, you have to make it so watertight, and watertight when it's dry. So if water tries to infiltrate, it can't get into it. Those kegs were even sort of probably higher quality in one sense. They would have the individual staves with tongue and grooves to help them not leak, so that water would get in and damage the gunpowder. But you'd have all these other kinds of woods. So if you need your liquid inside, say like wine, to breathe a little bit, then you would use a particular kind of oak. If you needed it not to leak in any way, shape, or form, you needed to use something like white oak, which really seals up. Different kinds of oaks. Some of them you can almost use like a straw. The little tiny holes in the wood, sort of the grain, go all the way from one end to the other, so they don't hold water as well. So they would use different types of oak from different places. They might make kegs out of completely different materials like pine or birch or something like that, depending on whether it's some, like your butter churn. So, wow, lots of different varieties of wood and the quality that they need to be when you put them together.
So here's a super chat from Solaris the Long Hauler Rail Fan. And it says, hey guys, did they ever line the barrels with copper or other material? And then somebody else was wondering, are these unsealed or is it just the wood?
Right, so the highest quality ones, they would be just the wood. We get like the water kegs. They don't have to be as high a quality and they don't just for water, and they do seal those with wax or paraffin. So you might put different kinds of liners in it, but most of them are probably high enough a quality in the 18th century that they didn't need to put any kind of lining in them.
Okay, so here's a super chat from Eric F. What different metals might be used to make the hoop in the time period? I've wanted to try making a bucket with period materials, but not sure if what's available at the hardware store would be right.
Yeah, what's available at the hardware store will probably be a mild steel. Now, they didn't have mild steel in the 18th century. More than likely, they would have used a straight iron hoop, just simple, soft iron. Or you're going to see lots of wooden hoops in the time period. So ash hoops are, ash bends very, very well and is very, very strong in that kind of a setting. Maybe hickory or something like that, something that bends very easily also. But, you might have seen something like brass or copper, but I doubt it. I think standard, simple, inexpensive iron hooping is probably the most likely if it has a metal hoop on it at all.
They did at times paint the bands, didn't they? So if you painted them, no one would know if it was iron or metal.
Too true. But, and mild steel is going to be the thing that is least expensive to use today. And it's so easy to work instead of the iron of the 18th century, which was more brittle. There's a reason why mild steel is the thing today. They didn't have the means to manufacture it in the time period, or else they would have.
So here's another super chat from Speed Style Tony. Did they use pitch or tar to seal the barrels?
I doubt it. Although they used barrels to ship pitch and tar.
Yeah. And there's one picture that we'll maybe get to, maybe not, where it looks like they have something. And it's more 19th century, where it looks like they have something waiting with it, like something in it like it has pitch in it.
Right. And they may have, especially if it's like a bucket that's got to dry out and get wet again and dry and get wet. Sometimes it can take a while for something that's dried out to, you put liquid in it and it's going to leak for a while. And if you really want to, boom, I want this to dry and get wet, and something like pitching it will really speed that process up. You really don't have to worry about it leaking.
Okay, I think we're ready to go ahead.
Okay, let's look at some images now of what's going on here. So we've got a cooper here. We don't know what's going on in the background. I don't even know why they have this whole thing in the background.
I'm sure there's a
story. It's really weird.
Because I think actually, you know what? I think this is like part of that opera of the Cooper.
Oh, well, that would make total sense. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was an opera called the Cooper. So we have basically his old kind of little setup here. Very, very primitive compared to the factory. He's got his log stump here that he's using for working on the raw staves and for splitting them, for the initial shaping of them. Then he's got a sawhorse or a shave horse here. Very, very primitive, or a very, very simple kind of foot treadle and dumb head. It's a very small one for holding those staves down, but they're all exactly the same size. So he probably has it so that it works exactly for what he needs. And he only has, in this setting, just the draw knife. So he doesn't have very many tools. Now, if this is the play, they're just showing a truncated version of what he would need.
That's right.
And, we have the little cresset here. I believe that's the name of the little sort of brazier that you would use. The thing that's going to be, that you're going to fire in there is the shavings of all the staves that you do. So you're going to shave off all these things, and then boom, they're going to be this instant little fire. It doesn't have to last very long. It doesn't have to have incredible heat, but they will burn very, very rapidly and give you a heat just like that, and then it goes down again, right? And because you're not trying to build a giant campfire, you just want, hey, I want 10 minutes of heat, and then I want it to go away. So we see the hoops there on the ground, and then we see him hammering on the hoops. We don't see any head material. We don't see how he's kind of bringing those together. We don't see the windlass. So he's missing some parts, but that's all right. Here's a workman, and he is just working on one of the heads. Now notice the markings here. Now this is probably a head that has been taken off of a keg because it's already marked. And the markings are really important in the time period. The markings will tell you what's in the keg and how big it is and what the quality is and who actually made the keg and who made the stuff that's in the keg. Just lots and lots of things. Maybe a date. Maybe, there we see a lot of kegs with kind of markings on the end of it. The cooper here is in the trades. All these different trades here at the top. Knife sharpeners and I don't know what timberman is. He's a timberman, I guess.
Well, there's little tinker.
Yes.
Oh no, where's the timberman? Carpenter.
He's down at the bottom. He's
Carpenter's
the
on the
kettle
upper
lapper.
left-hand side.
Right.
And then scissor sharpener on the bottom left. But see how I didn't do potter or shoemaker?
Right.
I didn't bother.
They can figure that out. Good job. Here we have some other just straight up illustrations. We see on the left hand side the very, very classic kind of hammer from the 18th century that all the trades, many of them trades used, and he's got a driver and he's driving those hoops on. And in the background we see somebody who is getting those. He's got fire in the barrel so that he can help bend those staves around and fit the hoops on there. And this is a 19th century image here on the right hand side, and he's making a much bigger, taller barrel. We can just see the fire that he's working with, and he's driving on those hoops, again with the driver, with the hammer. And if you notice this little top part with the tools, draw a knife, a regular knife. That thing with the 3 points is a little marking device, I believe. But notice all the way around it, that is a windlass device. So he snaps that around the outside of it and then levers it together to bring those staves. That's some hard work.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all done by hand. This is a very late image, but notice, basically nothing's changed. It's 100 years later, and he's doing it exactly the same way. There are no big tools here. It's just some guy there beating on wood with a hammer. That's it. And he's making kegs of all different sizes. Even the little kid there, the little boy, he's got a backpack made like a little barrel. And of course, this trade and style goes back 1,000 years. This is probably from the 16th century here, and we've got people working with barrels. They're not making them; they are just using them in a brewery situation. in fact, in this time period and into the 18th century, it was illegal to make barrels in the brew house. That was something the cooper did, and he kept his job to himself. By the time we get to the 19th century and those guilds kind of get broken up, and the brewery is where most of the kegs are being made in the 19th century. There we have the different, this person on the left-hand side is somebody who's working on the hoops. And again, that's another woodland art. So somebody might live in the forest and just make hoops for barrels and ship off giant wagon loads of hoops.
I'm considering how many hoops, how many barrels were in that mountain that was in the, the video.
You can imagine.
I can imagine in the 18th century, you could certainly have a trade just being one of the components of a barrel.
Yeah. The center image here is somebody who's drinking, and they have a little barrel with a spigot. We can't see very much of the barrel, but we can see the spigot. We don't see a lot of spigots, but we find examples of spigots in the archaeological digs of the 18th century.
And strangely, in some of the pictures that I didn't include here, you'll see someone that clearly got something out of a barrel with no spigot in sight. And you're thinking maybe the artist just didn't want to draw it.
Right? Sometimes it's just like it's shooting out of the head, and you're like, what how does that work, right?
This does not look safe.
But while we see a lot of wooden spigots today, there are some styles of very primitive wooden spigots that are almost like a, I don't know, it's like a plug that you just sort of pull out and put it back in. But the archaeological ones that we have are pewter and brass and made via casting technique. And we have this person here on the right-hand side who has a barrel, a wheelbarrow that's specifically meant for hauling around. He's a vinegar seller.
Yes.
So he's got a barrel with vinegar in it. And notice the shipyard here, and if we start looking for barrels, we're going to start seeing them everywhere. Obviously, they're in the foreground here. And these guys are putting probably salt fish into barrels. We have a barrel on, and their barrels aren't, they're pretty straight up and down. The barrel in the wheelbarrow is probably more like a liquids barrel. Notice the dog pulling that as an auxiliary power source.
He's helping.
We have people a little bit further back manhandling barrels. We have giant stacks of barrels behind people. We have barrels going up into the ship. There are just barrels everywhere. In fact, do you see any other container devices?
I mean, in some of the other pictures, we'll see,
I don't see
boxes
any crates.
and crates and stuff, but
I don't see any bales.
This one.
I just see barrels. Here we go. There's some crates here, something, bales of something here. And this is a barge, a boat for transportation, probably just inland waterways here, probably Great Britain. And there's little barrels. Now, little barrels might be gunpowder. They generally weren't as big. But they're not the huge transport barrels like we see in so many other situations. Here we got a huge barrel on one side, kind of medium, I don't know, 63 probably, hogshead that the old man is working on there. Notice how many hoops there are on that keg. Like, what is it going to do? Explode? It looks like it's nothing but hoops. We've got multiple different sizes here in the background, and even in the center background, we've got the gentleman moving sort of a tub of something that it's a barrel, not a wheelbarrow, barrow, but a barrow, where you're carrying two things, two people on one end on the other, and it's made with cooperage. She's cleaning a barrel. Now you might take the head out to clean the inside. Sometimes we got recipes for cleaning barrels, trying to disinfect them basically from the 18th century, putting sulfur smoke into them. standard settings. Look, you've got a castle and you've got barrels sitting around on the outside.
So somebody was wondering a little bit earlier. They were wondering how long barrels might have been used for, like how long were they useful, and how many times they might have been reused.
I don't have perfect. I can only guess with an answer like that. They can last a tremendous amount of time if they are kept well, and a ship's cooper will keep. He'll like break down the barrels. So on his trip, so you're going someplace, you're expecting to pick up some kind of liquid thing. He might be making barrels the whole time he's going there. He comes, they fill up the barrels with the liquid stuff. They get to their destination. They offload it. Maybe they sell the barrel with the contents, or maybe he might break down the barrels. So just keeping the hoops, if they're metal, try chucking the wood parts, or keeping the wood parts and reconstructing the barrels. Because if you got an empty barrel, you can take it all apart to its constituent components, and it's going to take up a lot less space. So it's kind of handy. It's like folding up a cardboard box, right? And then you just construct it again. Standard kind of scene here. We got all these barges. We have kegs to be put in them. Here are people putting. I mean, it might be a duck, but I think it's a fish that they're putting in.
I imagine it's
in there, or maybe it's a small beaver. I don't know what it is, but they're putting more than likely saltfish into the barrel there. And barrels and notice he's got the tools there to work on the barrels. Now how he's got the head out of it and it's got the top band on it, I don't. Maybe the artist really wasn't thinking too hard about it, but generally you take the head out of a barrel, you got to take off the top parts of the bands so that you can open that up enough to get the head out. Look at that. It's like people getting transported, and yet we also have kegs along the way. It's like, well, we're going to fill up the boat with women and children and kegs and, baskets of whatnot. Somebody who has giant wine casks, and they're loading them down basically a tunnel down into a cellar where they will store whatever that is. Looks like wine to me. Here people are out on a picnic, or maybe after harvest, lunchtime, whatever, because it looks like it's harvest time. And there's a little barrel there holding whatever beverage. Don't ask me what it was. Huge barrels here in the foreground. This is probably the Thames here, and
I mean, I'm trying to guess how big they are, and they're just.
Well, we'll talk about size.
Okay. Well, someone asked about that. They asked about size, and I was trying to envision, because what I think is odd is because we sell 2 gallon, 3 gallon, 5 gallon, and 10 gallon, and the 5 gallon, the 2 and 3 look very, very similar, but the 5 and 10 actually look pretty close to each other, even though they double the capacity.
Exactly. Got barrel getting moved into a household, which is, you wouldn't think. It's like, okay, that's a strange spot for it. But
I'm sure there's a story behind this.
Yeah, there's a story.
It did not mention what it was.
There's it looks like they have a way to move the barrels up to the top floor. I don't know why you would have barrels up to the top floor, but you can see the markings on the end of the barrels. Those are big barrels, heavy stuff. A water cart, so a wagon with a barrel on it just for hauling water. And this is somebody putting salt and meat into not a typical storage barrel. Like, it's going to be, the end is going to stay open the entire time. Really, it's just like a giant bucket. But notice he's got a flat pan that's made by a cooper also, like a wash tub. And there she's got one too. That's kind of hard to hold together when it's that big around and that flat, but obviously it's what they're using here. We've got buckets here, and we've got a wellhead that was made by a cooper in this circumstance. Very interesting design. Just a bucket in the background. I mean, this is something that people are going to see all the time. He's even eating on an overturned wash tub made by the cooper. Loved this one. He's got a little wooden bucket made by the cooper and a little tiny barrel hanging in the window. Again, what's he got in that little tiny barrel? Don't we want to know?
What could it be?
Don't we want to know? This is the cooper working at Williamsburg, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We can see hoops on the window or on the walls, and he's got the jointers shave in the background. He's got the horse that he's working on. We have barrels and buckets in all sorts of different stages. And there we are, back to the beginning. I'm behind.
Okay, well, hold on. Oh, I'm
Wait,
sorry.
every week
Yes.
I try to get to the brand new Patreon and new and renewing YouTube members. We've got new and renewing YouTube member Stinky, and James Lawson, and Wilted Sis, Paul Blackmore, Daniel Ikuma, Kimberly Doe, Norman C., Ben, and then Dennis Ponce and Derry, and it looks like new Patreon, Nithon LD and Riley. There we go. Got that. Woohoo! Thank you for your support.
Okay, I've got some questions. So, this is a member chat from Mikey Mike, and it says, when did they start to char the barrels inside?
They're going to get some charring in the manufacturing process. So you can see they're building up that fire on the inside. Now, I don't know about the specificness of the whiskey barrels and the charring on the inside. I don't believe that is an 18th century thing. I think they would have been mildly charred, but I doubt that they would have specifically done that in the 18th century. But I could be totally wrong about that. I think it's probably something that's happening and specifically trying to happen in a 19th century and early 20th century context, and then we still do that today, specifically for the flavoring. But I don't think that's what they were trying to do in the 18th century. Those products certainly aren't as ubiquitous in the 18th century as they start to be in the 19th and 20th century.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so this is a super chat from Macaroni Gluer Games. Hi everyone, haven't been able to watch live lately, but wanted to check in.
Good to see you here.
Okay, so this is a super chat from Solaris the Long Hauler Railfin, and it says, as for transportation, I assumed that they would pack some kind of material in between the barrels. Did you?
They're sturdy enough that I don't really think you see that.
Yeah, I feel like maybe sawdust sometimes. Like they packed other things with sawdust, but what I was thinking of was ice specifically, and that's more for insulation than for to soften.
Nah, I think they're supposed to be so strong that you don't really need to worry about it.
So this is a super chat from Max Arco. Were there different quality of barrels depending on the item? I've received present day things in small, very thin lathe barrels padded inside with Excelsior.
Right. So you've got all sorts of different varieties, thicknesses and thinnesses. So I remember, we would still see occasionally when I was a kid, like nail kegs. Those are very thin. They just needed to hold the nails together. You'd get a little thin barrel that was, so high, and they would transport them all full of nails, because nails are going to eat their way out of a cardboard box. But a thin wooden little barrel is going to hold them together better. And different sorts of coopers would do different qualities, right? So somebody who's doing the real high quality stuff like the beer barrel is going to be the high end cooper versus somebody who's doing the very simple thin barrels, not nearly as skilled.
Okay, this is a super chat from Solaris the Long Hauler Railfan, and it says, it's interesting to see how modern media, such as video games, have depicted such things as barrels and crates.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always happy to run across them in a game. I'm like, oh, that looks familiar.
Yeah,
and
look at that.
in fact, I think sometimes they do the imaging off of real things. So they'll,
Right.
get a barrel and they'll image it and they'll throw it in. And so it says good proportions and as close as they can get to the real thing. Okay. All right. I think we are caught
Okay.
up.
So I've got here a regulations from the 1726 Massachusetts laws, right? And they had some specific rules about the kegs they used for transporting of tar, pitch, turpentine, and rosin. And the barrels for tar are to be 32 gallons, and half barrels 16 gallons, and none under. And then, it's like they have to be marked in a particular way. They have to, let's see, what does it say? Shall set his distinct brand mark on all his casks made for those commodities. So there we have, here's set in law. It's like, no, if you're going to be selling this, it's got to be in a keg and it's got to be this size and it has to be marked. And in a different part of the laws in Massachusetts, there's you're talking about a size, sort of like judging of casks, and he talks about the sizes. So they're supposed to be of the London sizes, at least at this time in Massachusetts. That is to say, a butt, it contains 126 gallons. Puncheons, 84 gallons. Hogsheads, 63 gallons. Tierce, 42 gallons. Barrels, so in this case, barrel is a term for a particular size cask. The barrel is to be 31 gallons, or 31 and a half gallons. I love it. And made of sound, well-seasoned timber, free of sap. So the rules here only go down to 31 and a half gallons. And after that, doesn't matter. It's like we don't want to care about, it doesn't have, those other ones don't have particular names. They probably do. It's just that it's not set down in law. Every cooper shall set his distinct brand mark on his own cask on penalty of 40 shillings. Whoever shall put any new cask being defective either in workmanship, timber, or a size, as aforesaid, upon proof thereof, made before one judge of the peace, so you don't even need to have two judges. One judge says, okay, he shall forfeit such cask and be fined the sum of 10 shillings. So it's like, you better be making them out of the right stuff, and they better be the right size. I don't know what this was. It probably is such small printing that I can't read it. So I'm not going to read it. We've got specialty tools. So the cooper is going to have a special cooper's block that he holds the wood in while he's working on the staves. He's got special draw knives, flat draw knives that are shaped this way, draw knives that are shaped the other direction, depending on what part he's working on. We have that long jointer's plane. We also have shaving horses. There is a special auger that he uses so you drill the bung hole, but we don't want a regular straight hole. We want a tapered hole. So he's got a special auger that comes in and gives you a tapered hole. And when you drill through the keg like this, you drill through, little pieces of wood are gonna be sticking out on the inside. So he's got a special tool that goes in there, and to shave that off on the inside. So he goes through. It's like a L shape. It's a little knife. It's called a thief. He's got a special little anvil to make the bands, to put the rivets in the bands. He's got the special knives to go on the inside of the barrel to shape it. And if you're doing this little groove for the head, you use a tool called a croze. And so it goes around the top of the head, and it's got a little knife that comes in and cuts the groove around the inside. And then it's just like he's got just buckets of specialized tools, and of course different styles of windlasses to bring those in, whether you need it to be an easy windlass, you just simple, basically pull on it, or a giant windlass that is like almost the ones in the movie where it has a big winding thing so that you can put like 1,000 pounds of pressure on it versus just enough that you can do by your hands. So the Cooper's just doing amazing stuff, and sometimes with pretty simple tools.
I think we're still. Somebody had asked about rope. They were wondering. I don't think we had the picture where we could see it bound in rope, but there was one. Did you run across the reason why some had rope instead of wood?
I think most of the time what you think is rope is actually withers. So it's like vines that are bound up. So depending on the style of keg, where it's made, they would use different sort of hooping materials, and they might use almost like a vine material. Then it's a little easier. Of course, it's bendier, and you can kind of wrap it around and twist it up. But you're only using the rope for like the windlass, so in the construction process, but not after the fact.
So other than the one statute mentioned the wood being well seasoned, did you see anything where they specifically said it had to be made out of certain woods?
I stopped after a while looking at the regulations. We might be able to find ones that talk specifically. It's like you have to use this style wood or that style wood. Probably more likely that those kind of rules are built in by the judge. So, these rules talk about, well, you're going to appoint such a person to judge these things. And more than likely, he would have the power to say, no, you're not going to make that keg out of that kind of wood. That's crap. That's not going to work. Those, and of course, if he was your friend, he'd probably get away with it.
No. It's escaped me. There was something I was going to ask.
She had a really good question.
Now. Oh, here it is. It's because it was written down right here. So earlier in the chat, somebody was wondering about it's already gotten answered in the chat, but they were asking about the tea in the Boston Tea Party and whether it was in barrels, whether the tea was. Right. And we were talking about the fact that it was probably in casks, and that when we were at the Boston Tea Party, they actually had one.
They're in tea chests. They're specifically little square crates that were made for that. And that Boston Tea Party ship is, they, in theory, have the only tea box / crate.
And it's very funny because they do list all the different things that it got reused for it to survive all this time.
Right. Yeah, they specifically wanted them to be destroyed.
Yes.
And because they didn't want people to, they didn't want to be accused of stealing the contents. So they want to make sure that it's like, no, destroy all those things. We don't even want to see the boxes. We just want it gone. But it's one of those things that was just ubiquitous, or just everywhere in the 18th century, and now we have a hard time finding a single example of it because it was just like a cardboard box. Who cares? We throw it out,
right?
We burn it,
you just
whatever.
reuse it for stuff. You burn it up when you're done, right?
No one cares, right? Yep. And there are many things from the early 20th century and certainly earlier time periods where Everyone had them. They were everywhere, and now there are very few examples. Say like shoes,
Yep.
right? How many men's shoes from the 18th century exist? You can count them on one hand. There aren't that many good examples, and yet every single person, or most every person, had a pair of shoes, if not 10 over their lifetime or more.
Okay, I think we're good.
We did it. It's the topics just go and go, right? We just have so many things that are happening in the 18th century, and they make us think about today. So undoubtedly, we have products today that we think are, how could anybody live without them? And in 20 years, no one will even know they exist. And it's like, oh, it'll be an antique. Look at that, there's a cell phone. I've never seen one of those, right? Cell phones is a great example, right? There basically were no cell phones before 1985. Now every single person has one or two or three of them, and couldn't live without them, and they're on their phone. And it could be that they will just plain disappear, or who knows what. And many things like barrels in the 18th century, where everyone had them, everyone lived with them, everyone knew a cooper, and now a cooper? What are you talking about? I want to thank everyone for being in the chat today and chatting. Thank you, Lauren, for your work on the pictures today. Ivy being on that console. And a super thank you to the super chat folks, the folks that help us out with being a member or being a Patreon person, commenting and having fun and sharing our videos with other people. That is so very, very important. The next week's video is going to be on Sunday, and it will be about Hannah Glass, and probably the most important cookbook of the 18th and 19th century, for that matter. And I still don't know what it's going to be called. It's going to be a hard sell, but it's going to be a great video. Ryan did a bunch of cooking for it. I did a bunch of talking, and it'll be a lot of fun. So thank you so much for your kind care of us in all that you do out there in YouTube land. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for watching.